Welcome back. You're listening to Get Real with Bob and Stacy. You're tuning in to our Leaders and Legends segment. Joining us by phone, we have a special guest, author of The 10% Entrepreneur, venture capitalist, and private equity investor based in New York, Patrick McGinnis. Welcome to the show, Patrick.
Thanks for having me.
So I want to share with everybody a little bit about Patrick's book, The 10% Entrepreneur, Live Your Startup Dream Without Quitting Your Day Job, available April 2016. His book, he details how to invest just 10% of your time and resources and still become a successful entrepreneur without losing the steady paycheck. With his own success story to back up his detailed plan, McGinnis shows readers that being a millionaire or a full-time entrepreneur is not necessary to start racking up small wins, have fun, and learn what it means to be an entrepreneur. So what is your success story that enabled you to write the book, Patrick?
So, Stacy, what happened with me was it was not a success in the beginning. I had to go through some pain first, and I'm hoping to save all of my readers the pain that I went through. But I started out, I was working on Wall Street. I had been investing as a private equity investor, working for a big fund for a number of years, and everything was going great. And then one day, unfortunately, 2008 came around, and I was working in a division of AIG. And so my company, as anybody who watched the news in 2008 will remember, basically blew up before my eyes. And my stock, I had some stock in the company, fell by 97%.
Wow.
So it was a pretty sobering moment for me. And so I woke up the next day and I thought to myself, I will never put myself in a position ever again where I have to rely on one company or one job for my livelihood. And so I started doing things on the side. And since that time, I've actually done over 20 different ventures, everything from investing in startups to investing in real estate. And so I've had a bunch of different really exciting projects. You know, I've done several deals in the real estate sector that have been very successful. One of them returned 35% IRR in the space of a year. And then I've also had a company I invested in the tech sector that basically I invested when the company had no revenues, and 2-3 years later it raised $100 million in financing.
Wow.
So I've been really, really successful in doing this, and it's made me realize that this is something that lots of people can do, because it's more about being smart and doing things that you're good at than having millions of dollars to invest or being some sort of expert.
Wow. So I know Boston Magazine had said that you coined the term FOMO, or fear of missing out. What does that mean?
Right. So fear of missing out is this idea that, and this is a kind of a Facebook age reality. It's something that I noticed when I was a student at Harvard Business School back in 2004. And I would notice that nobody would sort of say no to anything. Anytime there was an invite, anything, you would always say yes. And so you ran around trying to do a million things at the same time. And so I called that the fear of missing out, and I wrote about it in our school newspaper. And then 10 years later, I got a call from Boston Magazine saying that they had done a research and that they had traced it back to me.
Wow.
Wow.
That's pretty awesome.
If only I had copyrighted that.
Yes.
It's open source, so everybody should just use it as much as they want, because you don't have to pay me for it.
So I'm interested in it because I have a business coach who always tells me that I'm like a mosquito at a nudist colony, because when I see opportunity, I immediately have to go focus on that opportunity. And he keeps saying to me, if you just focused on the one thing that you're really good at, which my main business is real estate. He's like, if you just focused on that, you'd become a billionaire, but you're so unfocused because you have a law firm and a coaching business and a fashion business. So what are your thoughts? Like, can you be good at everything?
Well, you can't be good at everything, but what I like to tell people is choose things that play to your strengths. So, you know, when I look at projects, what I try to do is, number one is I realize that I can only spend a certain amount of time on every particular project. So I try to find projects where the people who are running them on a day-to-day basis are good at what they do. And so I can then leverage all of their talents and strengths and intelligence and hard work for myself. But the second thing I try to do is only get involved in businesses where I can truly have a meaningful impact without having to put in tons of time. And that means, for example, that when I get involved in a business, I have three things that I look for. And if I can't get all of these three things right, then I don't get involved. The first is that I have to know how the company works, how it makes money, why the business is a good business. So really get the business. The second is I have to know the people involved well and know that I can trust them and that they share my values and that they're competent and that they're going to do a good job. But the third one, and this is the one that sort of usually clears out the stuff I shouldn't be doing, is I only get involved in things where I can actually make them more successful. I can bring in capital or a client, or I can bring real insights, relationships, key hires. So that keeps me from getting involved in projects that may look fun from the outside, but that aren't going to use my time very well.
All right, that's awesome. So know how the company makes money, know the people in the business well so that you know you can trust them, and only get involved where you can make them more successful. Can you share some stories from the book of, say, entrepreneurs who did stick with a paycheck, that kept their 40-hour work week for a while and ended up transitioning into entrepreneurship slowly?
Absolutely. I've got a couple that I really like. I'll give you one that's a New England story, since I know you're up in Massachusetts.
Great.
This is a company that I believe has stores up in Boston. It's called Luke's Lobster.
Okay.
And Luke is from Cape Elizabeth, Maine, but he was living down here in New York. And he was a banker, so working on Wall Street, working 60, 70, 80 hours a week. One day, Luke got out of the office on a rare occasion. He got out of the office on a Saturday, and he wanted to buy a lobster roll. But in New York City, you can't get a lobster roll for less than like $35, which is crazy.
Wow.
And so he said, "This is not, doesn't make sense. You know, I'm up in Maine, we could get them for a lot cheaper." And so he decided, he had worked in the summers when he was growing up. He had actually built his own lobster boat and sailed it and done lobstering when he was in high school. And his father was in the seafood business and had done some seafood trading and things like that. So he called up his dad and he said, "I have this idea. Can you help me figure out how to get supply? Let's pool a little bit of money together." They pooled together $35,000, and Luke basically couldn't quit his job because he couldn't afford to do that. And then they started looking into whether or not this made sense, and they did a bunch of work. You know, Luke did a business plan, and he looked at the market closely. And then he found a partner who understood restaurants and food much better than he did. And so he was able to bring kind of the seafood piece. He got a partner who understood the restaurant piece, and together they opened Luke's Lobster in New York City. They had their first store pay back the investment in 17 days.
Crazy.
No way.
Insane, right? And meanwhile, Luke is still working as an investment banker, and he did so for about a year until finally, when their second store opened, he joined as the president of the company. And what's so interesting, so he took a big salary cut. He took about a 70% salary cut to be able to do this full time, and he paid himself about $35,000. But he waited to do that until he had validation of the business plan, and then he jumped in full time. And now today, Luke's has over 20 stores. They're all over the place, and they're in Japan. And Luke has really, built a substantial business. But he did it in a way that he never had to worry about paying the rent or putting food on the table.
This is interesting. Now, I have a question for you because I know you're in venture capital and private equity. And so I own a large real estate company, and roughly a year ago, I had an opportunity to buy another real estate company. And the only way, I've never done this, my entire company has been built on just bootstrapping. And so in order for me to buy the other company, I had to go after private equity money. And I created a presentation. I presented this to private equity firms around Boston and New York City. And interestingly, the feedback I got was that, among other things, but I got told that because I am so diversified in multiple businesses, that private equity firms don't like to see that. Do you think that's the case, that you actually hurt yourself by having multiple positions?
It's a great question, and it's a question that I get a lot because people watch Shark Tank, and they say, well, the sharks always say you shouldn't be doing multiple things. And so I have two things to say on the topic. The first is, when you're raising capital from third parties, it is important to be able to show them that you are basically primarily focused on the business that they're going to get involved with. But at the same time, many entrepreneurs are out there, who are leading companies, are doing some projects on the side. I think the critical thing is to be able to show the people that your main incentives are aligned with theirs. And so if you're working on 5 businesses and only putting 50% of your time into the business that they invest in, I can understand that they would say, listen, we need you to focus. And that's one of the trade-offs of raising capital. On the other side of the equation, that is, precisely the trade-off of raising capital. Once you take money from an outsider, you have a boss. And so when I talk to a lot of young entrepreneurs or people thinking about raising capital, people think there's some sort of, and I understand for you there was a real need to raise capital, maybe to buy another business. A lot of people want to raise capital because it's the thing to do, and it seems like this very sort of impactful thing that you can do to change your business. But before you do that, you really need to keep in mind the fact that once you do raise capital, you do have a boss. And so I often encourage entrepreneurs to wait as long as they can before raising capital, because then you can control the business and you own everything that it creates.
Yes. Interestingly, when I was going through that process, I had interviewed Barbara Corcoran from Shark Tank and was talking to her about it. And she said, absolutely do not buy that other business because you're going to end up with a boss. You got to where you are already, bootstrapping, so just keep doing what you've been doing. So it's interesting you say that. Do you give people advice as to when it's time to quit the day job?
Absolutely. And I think one of the things that I talk about in the book is the fact that at some point, if you start something on the side, so there will be 10% entrepreneurs who never have to quit their day job, because you can be an investor in businesses, or you can be an advisor, meaning you can give your time for sweat equity in a business, and you can do that all day long without needing to put too much time into it. And that's a lot of what I've done. But if you start a company like a Luke and you're running that business and it's taking off, you really have to make a decision at some point. Either you bring in a partner who can run it full time, and we have examples in the book of people who have done that, or if it's really taking off and you have a huge upside and you love the business you've created, then you should consider leaving full time. When it gets to that breaking point where you realize you wake up in the morning and you're conflicted, because what you can never do is you can never shortchange your day job for your 10% project, because your day job is exactly the thing that allows you to do all of these things on the side. So you need to do right by your employer and respect the fact that you're getting paid by somebody else.
Right. And I know that you talk in the book about not only do you offer a plan to people in the book to show people how to select and engage in projects that will make them successful, but you also say that oftentimes these same entrepreneurs simultaneously become better at their day job.
Absolutely. And that's one of the things that we don't hear a lot about in terms of discussions of corporate culture, but there are some companies that have figured this out. There are companies like Google or 3M. The Post-it was created by employees of 3M who basically were told, go figure something out in your free time and bring it back to us. And so what I have seen with employees of large firms, and I have a great story about a lawyer who started this really cool company that makes bracelets that play school fight songs. And he went to Harvard Law School, and he has 2 patents, and he's a lawyer at this law firm now. I guess he's over in London. Guy works all the time, but he started this company on the side. And because of the fact that he has, and I think, Stacey, you'll relate to this, because he does business and he has to learn about financial statements and negotiations around financial items, he's much, much better as a lawyer. He can think like a business person, and so he has all the tools he needs to be able to really be a better lawyer and serve his clients more effectively.
That's awesome. So do you find that, at least with the people you interview, that most of them have a day job and then start one company, or is there a large percentage that sometimes I think entrepreneurship is like an addiction, that they just start all different types of companies?
There's a mix. There are some people who just have one idea and then they go after it and they build something and they focus predominantly on that. But what I've seen is exactly what you're saying, is once you start being an entrepreneur, once you get your feet wet and you know what it is and you realize it's not as scary as it seems, you can't really help yourself. And so what's so cool about, the fact that these days it's so cheap to start businesses, the costs of the technology and the costs of all the things you need to get going are so low, that you can engage with things as an entrepreneur, and it doesn't have to take over your life or your savings or anything like that. And so that's what we tend to see, is that somebody dips a toe and then they just want to put the whole foot and maybe then up to the knee and then just jump right in.
So we only have about a minute and a half left. Do you have any piece of advice? Like, is there any one big mistake that you see a lot of new entrepreneurs make?
Yes, I think the mistake that I've seen a lot of times is choosing entrepreneurship because you hate your day job. So you're sitting at your cube or you're in your office all day long and you just hate what you're doing. And so you just do something, you make an investment, or you get involved, or you try to start something just as a way of sort of giving yourself some therapy. And that is not usually a successful strategy. The way to start a business is to find something you believe in, do your homework, test it out, find people who can help you, and then build it up in a really thoughtful way. And so that's what I encourage people to do, and we take them through in the book how to figure out what you want to do and how to put that team together.
And Patrick, I have a quick question for you too. I know we're running out of time, but we have a couple minutes left. You mentioned in your bio that you invest in emerging markets. Could you share with us what kind of investments you're making in places like Morocco and Mozambique?
Absolutely. Well, those two are places that I've just been to for other work projects, so I haven't actually invested capital there.
Okay.
But where I do invest is in Latin America. So I've done investments in Brazil and Argentina, and what I do there is so my whole career has been in Latin America. I lived in Argentina when I was in college. I speak Spanish and Portuguese, and I go down there frequently. And so I like to think of myself as like a scout, like a baseball scout who travels around the country looking for the best, upcoming talent. I find great entrepreneurs from Latin America, and I will get involved at the earliest stages of their companies and help them to grow into global businesses. And so the best example of that is a company called Blue Smart, which is a smart suitcase that I met the entrepreneur when he had just basically gotten to the United States, and now that company has gone on. They did a $2.5 million fundraise on Indiegogo. They're in 90 countries, and I got in early because I know that culture, I know that country, and I'm able to kind of find the hidden gems. That's my strategy there.
Excellent. Good advice.
Awesome stuff. And where's the best place for people to buy your book and find out more information about what you're working on?
So you can get my book at any bookstore. It should be in all the local bookstores and also obviously at Amazon and BarnesandNoble.com. And you can find more about the book and about me at my website, which is PatrickMcGinnis.com, and that's McGinnis, the last name. And there you can get a free chapter. We have a quiz to help you figure out what kind of 10% entrepreneur you should be. And also you can find my blog and all kinds of information that gives you resources that you can actually use to put this strategy into place.
Nice. All right.
Great.
This is Patrick McGinnis, and he is the author of The 10% Entrepreneur, Live Your Startup Dream Without Quitting Your Day Job. Thank you for joining us today, Patrick.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Patrick. That's going to do it for this edition of Get Real with Bob and Stacy. Make sure you tune in again next weekend for more.